Beth Dutton may have just made the biggest mistake of her life, and the scariest part. She probably doesn't even realize it yet. Because after watching the Dutton Ranch episode 6 trailer closely, something feels different. Something feels off. And for the first time since Beth and Rip arrived in Texas, it genuinely feels like Beth might be losing control. Not over the ranch. Not over the business. But over herself. And if you know Beth Dutton, you know exactly how dangerous that can be. Because Beth has survived enemies. She has survived betrayal. She has survived family wars, corporate wars, and emotional destruction. But the one thing Beth has always struggled to survive, it is her own choice. And episode 6 might finally prove that. Because whatever Beth decides in this trailer, it doesn't feel strategic. It feels emotional. An emotional Beth. That version of Beth tends to leave destruction everywhere she goes. So today, we're breaking down why episode May 6th quietly be setting up the downfall of everything Beth and Rip have built in Texas, and why Beth may have just walked directly into the biggest trap of her life. Let's get into it. Before we start, make sure you hit subscribe because we're covering every Dutton Ranch trailer, breakdown, theory, and hidden detail every single week. Now, let's talk about Beth. Beth Dutton has always been someone who controls the room. Even when she's losing, she somehow makes everyone else feel like they're the ones in danger. That's her power. She intimidates. Manipulates. Calculates. And most importantly, she always thinks 3 steps ahead. At least, that used to be true. Because Texas has changed the equation. See, Montana was familiar territory. Beth understood the game there. She knew the enemies. Knew the politics. Knew exactly who she could trust, and who she needed to destroy. But Texas? Texas is different. Texas is unpredictable. And in episode 6, that unpredictability may finally catch up to her. Because if the trailer hints are accurate, Beth is about to make a decision driven by fear. And fear is something Beth usually punishes in other people. Let's talk about what the trailer actually seems to be setting up. Beth looks exhausted. Frustrated. Cornered. And maybe for the first time all season, uncertain. That matters. Because Beth Dutton never shows uncertainty unless something serious is happening underneath the surface. And what's happening underneath the surface? Pressure. Massive pressure. The ranch is struggling. The future feels unstable. And Beth is carrying the emotional weight of trying to protect Rip while also holding everything together. That's a dangerous combination. Because eventually, even the strongest people crack. Now here's where things start getting interesting. The trailer seems to hint that Beth is preparing to trust someone she absolutely shouldn't. And if you've been paying attention, you probably already know who that person is. Beulah. And this feels like the mistake. Because let's be honest. Beulah doesn't feel trustworthy. Not even a little bit. Everything about her screams patience. Observation. Calculation. She moves like someone who already knows everyone's weakness. Think about it. Why would Beth suddenly lower her guard? Why would someone as smart as Beth risk trusting a person she clearly doesn't fully believe in? Simple. Desperation. And desperate people make terrible decisions. Even smart ones. Especially smart ones. Because smart people convince themselves they're still in control, even when they're not. And I think that's exactly what episode 6 is trying to show us. Beth thinks she's managing the situation. Beth thinks she's controlling the terms. Beth thinks she's still the one holding leverage. But what if she's wrong? What if Beulah has been playing a completely different game this entire time? Here's something people forget about Beth: her biggest weakness has never been enemies. Her biggest weakness has always been emotion. Specifically, Rip. Because Beth becomes reckless when Rip is involved. Protective. Impulsive. Sometimes even irrational. And episode May 6 put Rip directly in danger. Not physically. Emotionally. Financially. Mentally. And if Beth feels like Rip's future is threatened, that changes everything. Because suddenly, Beth stops thinking like Beth. And starts thinking emotionally. And emotional decisions, those are the ones that usually cost the most. Now let's imagine the worst-case scenario. Beth agrees to something risky. Maybe a business arrangement. Maybe a deal. Maybe information she shouldn't trust. And what if that decision slowly starts unraveling everything? What if Beulah doesn't attack directly? What if she simply waits? Waits for Beth's own choices to destroy her. That feels very possible. And honestly, very terrifying. Because enemies like Beulah are dangerous. But enemies who let you destroy yourself, those are the worst kind. And Rip? Rip might not even realize what's happening until it's too late. That's another major problem. Because Rip trusts Beth. Completely. He follows her instincts. Believes in her decisions. Protects her without question. That changes their relationship. Maybe not immediately. But eventually. And episode 6 feels like the beginning of emotional cracks. Now let's talk about the title itself. Beth just made the biggest mistake of her life. That sounds dramatic. But think about Beth's history for a second. This is someone who has survived unimaginable trauma. Someone who made mistakes before and somehow kept standing. So if this really is her biggest mistake, then whatever happens next has to be huge. Not small. Huge. Life-changing. Relationship-changing. And Beth? Beth may have just handed hers over willingly, possibly ranch-ending. And honestly, the trailer feels like it knows something we don't. The pacing feels slower. The energy feels heavier. Almost like the calm before disaster. And in shows like this, that usually means something bad is coming. Very bad. Here's my theory. Episode 6 won't show the full consequences yet. Instead, it will plant the decision. The moment. The mistake. And then let the fallout explode later. That's how these stories work. Slow burn. Emotional damage. Delayed consequences. The kind that hits harder because you saw it coming, but still couldn't stop it. And if I'm right, Beth may already be standing at the edge of disaster. She just doesn't know it yet. But there's another possibility here. What if Beth knows exactly what she's doing? What if the trailer wants us to think she's making a mistake, when in reality, she's baiting someone? Because let's not underestimate Beth. She's unpredictable. She plays dangerous games. And sometimes she looks vulnerable on purpose. Could this all be strategy? Maybe. But episode 6 feels different. Because this time, Beth actually looks tired. And tired people make mistakes. Now imagine Rip discovering Beth hid something important from him. A deal. A secret. A risk. Would he understand? Probably. Would he forgive it? Eventually. But trust? Trust gets complicated after that. And Beth and Rip? They've already survived enough. How much more pressure can this relationship actually take? Because here's the truth nobody wants to say, Texas hasn't healed them. Texas has tested them. Every single episode has chipped away at the dream. The peace. The fresh start. And episode 6. Episode 6 feels like the moment the dream starts breaking apart. And that's why I think Beth's biggest mistake may not actually be business-related at all. It might be emotional. Trusting the wrong person. Pushing Rip away. Trying to carry too much alone. Believing she can control something uncontrollable. That feels very Beth Dutton. And very dangerous. So the real question becomes, can Beth recover from this mistake before it destroys everything? Or has the damage already begun? Because once certain decisions are made, a risk. Would he understand? Probably. Would he forgive it? Eventually. But trust? Trust gets complicated after that. And Beth and Rip, they've already survived enough. How much more pressure can this relationship actually take? Because here's the truth nobody wants to say, Texas hasn't healed them. Texas has tested them. Every single episode has chipped away at the dream. The peace. And episode 6. Episode 6 feels like the moment the dream starts breaking apart. And that's why I think Beth's biggest mistake may not actually be business-related at all. It might be emotional. Trusting the wrong person. Pushing Rip away. Trying to carry too much alone. Believing she can control something uncontrollable.